Conference 2023 started today under the theme Shaping the Future of Energy Towards Value Creation. This conference takes place at a time when Namibia is positioning herself to become an oil-producing economy and a global hub for renewable energy. For details on the exciting energy future of Namibia, I'm joined by the Managing Director at Rich Africa Consultancy and NIEC convener, Ndapwilapo Shimutwikeni. Ma'am, good evening and thank you so much for joining us here on the Daily Roundup.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me.
Following last year's offshore hydrocarbon finds, does Namibia have the potential to become one of the leading energy-producing countries on the continent?
My answer will be a yes, obviously, just because I think the decision makers, it all depends on the decision makers and the policy makers, obviously, as well as the investors in the country. From a policy perspective, we have a national energy policy that clearly states, the direction the country will go in the event of a discovery. So it's very important for the country and the investors and the community to be very intentional in terms of how they can unlock value from our resources to ensure that it benefits the wider society. And that's already stipulated in the national energy policy. And that's actually the reason why we're hosting this conference, is to ensure that we bring experts, thought leaders, to share best practices and lessons learned from other nations who have actually discovered oil and also made mistakes. So we're actually in a very unique position to learn from other countries and to actually leapfrog and to ensure that these resources benefit the Namibian nation.
Yeah. Let's get to the gist of things. Now, in addition to hydrocarbons, what promises does green hydrogen bring?
Currently, globally, at the global level, there's a whole discussion and a need for energy transition, which is a valid need. But at the same time, we also have to industrialize Africa, which requires energy. Therefore, as Namibia, the country is focused on an energy mix, so leveraging all our energy resources. So from the renewable energy space to oil and gas to green hydrogen, to ensure that these resources fuel and energize the industrialization agenda for the African continent and for Namibia as a whole.
How realistic is an energy mix transition for a country such as Namibia?
No, I think it's very realistic, and it's realistic across the continent and also globally. The reality is that we have 600 million Africans on the continent with no access to power. And that translates to not having infrastructure, not having educational facilities to educate our people, not having hospitals for our people. So it is all linked. So therefore it is, it's a balancing act. We have to take into account that, we have to reduce the pollution in the world. And at the same time, it's a balancing act in terms of the social impact. So for example, in terms of the ESG, the environmental, social and governance aspects of natural resources is super important, and to make sure that each element is given the right attention based on the needs of the country.
This conference brings energy experts from other African countries as well. What are some of the commonalities that they have with Namibia?
That's a great question. And not only African countries, we also have experts from the Caribbean nations, such as Guyana, which is a country that had big finds and also has the same population as Namibia. I think the major commonality is how do we ensure that resources translate into wealth and development for its citizens. I think that's the number one question. And also to ensure that these resources, the process of exploiting these resources does not pollute our environment. And the commonality is really just about how does this translate into development. I think that's one, and how do you go about it, taking into account that international companies are investing billions of money into our countries. So they do have to have their return. They have to recoup that investment. So how do you balance that with ensuring that some of those benefits are trickled down into the nation? So it's all about job creation. It's all about how do we unlock the oil and gas value chain? Because I think what is important is that the sector has lots of services around it, from transportation, from tourism. So many services are linked to the oil and gas industry. So it goes beyond the industry. So I think the commonality is how do we create value for all the stakeholders?
Well, of course, the conference will continue for the next 2 days, but in conclusion, perhaps you can tell us, Ms. Shimutwikeni, what some of the major topics were that were discussed in today's sessions and what the expected outcome is for this conference.
Yes. So today we had strategic industry intelligence sessions. So it was breakaway conversations around different issues, such as master classes on local content, presentations on alternative financing. So how do we finance the energy sector? We looked at low carbon technologies to ensure that we protect our environment. We discussed how the public and private sector can collaborate. So we had 3 sessions running at the same time. Delegates had the opportunity to go to sessions of interest and to network. So today was more of an icebreaker around strategic industry insights. Tomorrow morning we'll have the official opening ceremony where our Honorable Minister Tom Alwendo will open the conference, which is also feature ministerial panel. So we have guests from outside the country, Deputy Minister from Senegal, Ghana, we have Equatorial Guinea, as well as Angola, to come and share their experiences in terms of the process where we are at. Because also I think one of the key messages from this conference is that this is going to take time. It's not an overnight exercise. So it's 3 to 5 years to 7 years. So it's a process. However, we need to ensure that we're prepared to ensure that we unlock value for all the stakeholders.
Ms. Shimutwikeni, thank you so much for taking time out to speak to us this evening. Enjoy the cocktail event, and we hope to catch up with you a bit later on in the week.
No, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you. Well, we're going to take a short break. Let's take a